Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew Coronis. I'm the Managing Director of the Coronis Group, and with me today I've got Jodi Ford. Hello, Jodi. How are you?
Good. How are you? How is everyone?
Yeah, in this pretty muddled up world, I'm calling it. I don't know. I never thought we'd be doing this a month or so ago. So look, as you're aware, there's been a lot of discussion in the media about property management and rentals, certainly with the federal government, but more particularly with the state-based government and the Housing Minister, Mick de Brenni, what he came out on Friday, and what our wonderful Queensland government are doing this Wednesday, what they're going to be passing. So we thought we'd do a Q&A session for everybody and give some reassurance to you that we actually, number one, we are all over every bit of the information there is. Number two, that we have your best interests at heart. And number three, we're prepared as a business going forward to navigate any challenge that's been thrown at us. As part of our team, we manage more than 7,500 properties, which is 7,500 landlords and 7,500 tenants. And it really is quite a tricky road to try and navigate the fairness between the needs of a tenant who's been, unfortunately not their fault, been put out of work and have zero income, and the needs of a landlord who has banks and mortgages to pay. And we're here trying to make sense of that for you, to give you some comfort that it probably, and hopefully with the austerity measures that the federal government are going to be giving with JobKeeper and Job Seeker, with the amount of money will enable people to be able to pay their rent going forward. If you have any more questions, so we asked everybody to send questions. There are probably too many that came in today, so we've tried to condense the questions into groups. If you've got any more questions, what we had to say today, please send an email to Jodi Ford or myself. Our phones are on and our email address is there for you, that we can answer any question for you. So I think we'll go forward. I'll ask the questions, and Jodi obviously is a technically brilliant mind behind property management, who has been doing it for 30 years now, Jodi?
35 years. 35
years. So there's not much about property management that Jodi Ford doesn't know. With our property management department and the goals they're kicking at the moment, I'm so proud of them. They're working tirelessly. They have your best interests at heart, whilst being very, very fair to our tenants as well, because we've got to all work together in this, guys. This is not about one-sided. And we're not here to say that there is one side for the landlord and one side for the tenant. We're here to work out a solution for us all going forward. And I think that's the fairest thing possible. All right, question one. While there's a moratorium on evictions, Jodi, tenants that can't pay their rent until the end of September 2020, where a tenant is able to pay the rent, can a notice to leave with effect prior to the end of September 2020 be issued? For example, where a landlord wants to move into their rental property, or a landlord wants to sell their rental property, and would prefer to do this with the property vacant, so there's no access prevention for themselves or prospective purchasers. Can we do that?
Yes, a landlord can do that. I think it's really important to remember through this whole process that for any tenants that aren't directly affected by COVID-19, all of the normal legislation applies. So for any of those people who haven't specifically been affected, then there is no change. So in that instance, with the moratorium, it is important that to know that the tenant can stay at the property or remain in the property that the tenant can remain in the property if they are directly affected, and we can negotiate that out. So obviously as agents, it's really important for us to use our skills by way of negotiation to come to the right conclusion for both parties. But if, for example, they do need to move into the property, or if you need to move into the property yourself, then all of those normal rules apply.
Yeah, sure. So effectively, there is a special set of rules for people who have been affected by COVID-19, correct?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah.
And sorry, if I can add to that, in that instance, so they will take both parties into consideration, because
sure.
A landlord is in need as well. So what we've got to weigh up is the needs of both parties.
Sure. Okay, good. Jodi, if a tenant was already behind in their rent prior to COVID-19 pandemic and has been issued with a notice to leave, is it still valid, or will the tenant be allowed to stay in the property?
No, my understanding is that if a tenant is not directly affected by COVID-19 and this happened before COVID-19, then they are not allowed to remain in the property. We would go through the normal process of applying to QCAT for eviction of that tenant.
Good. Do all landlords have to extend a tenant's lease until the end of September 2020? Or can a landlord choose to issue a periodic lease as long as a notice to leave is not issued to a tenant prior to the end of September 2020?
So my understanding is that there'll be an automatic rollover of that tenancy up to the 30th of September. So it doesn't really matter whether there needs to be an actual extension or a periodic agreement. It will be an automatic extension to the 30th of September.
Yeah, cool. Jodi, how do the proposed new measures impact a landlord's ability to make an insurance claim for any lost rent, up to the limits of the insurance policy, of course? And can I make a claim for lost rent instead of agreeing to defer the payment plan?
My understanding with insurance policies, and we've got to be really careful with this one because every insurance policy is different, and there are varying multiple measures within those agreements. So my understanding is that the insurance policies or the insurers still have an obligation with regards to insurance, but as everyone is different, you would need to contact your individual insurance broker to find out what the conditions are for your particular policy.
Yeah, great.
There will be an obligation, however, for there to be an insurance still in effect.
Sure. How do these changes affect my landlord insurance in relation to unpaid rent or damage to my property? Can I still claim the full bond from the tenant if the repair work exceeds the amount of money?
Once again, I think if the tenant is not specifically affected by COVID-19, the claims would remain the same. However, in the event of there being a direct reflection or impact from COVID-19, you would need to speak to your individual insurance company, as they'll all be very different.
Sure. Jodi, what happens if the tenant doesn't pay rent at all? What are my options as a landlord now?
Yeah, look, my understanding again with this is that there is still an obligation on the tenant to pay rent. So if we renegotiate a rental amount and the tenant doesn't honour that rental agreement, then there will be a course of action to be taken in that regard. And for me, that would be conciliation, originally probably through the Residential Tenancies Authority and then through to QCAT.
Sure. Yeah, so in essence, there is still an obligation for everybody to abide by any rental payment that is negotiated. Absolutely. Yeah, cool. That's a big question.
It is.
I mean, a lot of people are very scared about that, and I totally get that. I'm a landlord myself, and we all are, and I get the fact the obligations that are there. So that's a really big question for everyone. If a reduction in rent has been negotiated, Jodi, does that mean that if the existing lease expires, say in September, that an automatic 6-month extension will be given to a tenant at the reduced rental rate?
No, again, the 30th of September is the final date that's been put forward at this point of time, and provided that passes tomorrow, the extension would only happen to the 30th of September. Sure.
Okay. So we should just stress that. This hasn't been passed as law yet in the Queensland Government, and hopefully that will be done tomorrow to give some surety around these answers. And whilst we're making our best endeavours to give you our insights into this, we're not quite sure until it's actually legislated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jodi, if the tenant doesn't pay their rent at all, despite the rent reduction, will they automatically grant it a 6-month extension since eviction is not allowed?
Again, that's very similar to what will happen by way of if they don't pay their rent. There are still avenues available to tenants and owners and us to mediate these situations. So that would go to a negotiation process through Residential Tenancies Authority, and then I would imagine to QCAT. Sure.
During the period, or any period, certainly the COVID-19 period as we're calling it, do all the changes mean that the terms and conditions which are stated in the General Tenancy Agreement are no longer applicable?
No, I would say absolutely not. Any tenancy that is not directly affected by COVID-19, everything remains the same.
Sure.
All of the terms and conditions in the tenancy agreement remain the same, and the only amendments that would happen to that or negotiations around that agreement would be if they are directly affected by COVID-19, and that would then become a negotiated process for depending on which part of that agreement we're discussing.
Sure. If a tenant refuses entry during COVID-19 period, specifically routine inspections to check the condition of the property, what rights will the landlord have when a normal life resumes and we discover the property has been not been well looked after?
Yeah, again, I believe that all the normal obligations are there for the tenant to look after the property. So even if they are directly affected, if we can't gain access to the property, all of our routine inspections now are being done by way virtually, and can be done really thoroughly. I think there was a lot of concerns around routine inspections, and that owners felt that they weren't going to get the same level of inspection happening because a tenant could avoid showing a particular room, or there were some concerns around all of that. But the way we've organised our routine inspections to take effect virtually means that we can ask tenants to actually go through that with us.
Sure.
So we will ask them to open up cupboards, we'll ask them to show inside the oven, we'll ask them to do all of those things, or look at all of those things that we would normally look at. Our checklists are very thorough around that. So the protection levels will be there still to a degree with the virtual inspections. But if a tenant doesn't look after the property, that's why the bond is there. And at the end of the tenancy, that still applies.
Thank you. This is a really big question because we've talked about financial hardship and proving the fact that someone's been affected by COVID-19. And I'm pleased to say, as an industry, with the support of the REIQ, we got behind and helped the government understand both the landlord's point of view and the tenant's point of view, because I think it was very one-sided tenant before we got involved. And we were quite scared for you and for ourselves that there was just going to be no proof of as a tenant that I'm affected by COVID-19. So the question here is, which is I think a great question, how are the tenants being asked to prove financial hardship?
Look, I have to admit that was my biggest concern. My biggest concern was that there was not going to be required to have any evidence in that regard.
Sure.
And I think that the state government, the solution that they've come up with is very sensible and very effective, because essentially the tenants are expected to provide the same level of proof as they would when obtaining the tenancy agreement. So that has always been satisfactory to landlords to this point of time. So using that same level of requirement is a really smart way of doing it.
Yeah, great. And I totally agree. I think what the government is proposing, and I said proposing because it hasn't been passed yet, is fair on both sides. And I think they've done a great job. We'll give Minister De Brenny and the team from the state government now with what they've proposed. We think is a fair solution for all.
Yes.
Next question. If a tenant, if the tenants prove that they are unable to pay the full rent, is the landlord obligated to negotiate a lower rent until September 30? And will the tenant be required to pay back the rent deficit that they incurred during that period?
Yes, look, there's two sides to this, because some landlords are prepared to waive the rent, and some landlords would prefer a deferral of the rent. We believe a deferral of the rent is a reasonable way to go, and we would certainly be discussing that with our landlords. But I guess this is where really good property managers come into effect, because the key piece of all of this will be negotiating an outcome that works for the tenant as well as for the landlord.
Sure.
And where that is spoken about very flippantly at the moment, I think it is a key piece to this whole process, because if you've got somebody as a landlord and you're negotiating a rent process with a tenant, with somebody who doesn't have the skills to do that, and I know this sounds like I'm giving a plug to property managers, but at the end of the day, it is the key piece to all of this. And if you've got a great property manager negotiating this process with you, then we'll come to the right outcome for landlords as well as for tenants, which I believe is a deferral of rent to a point in time that it is able to be paid back.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think there's a skill set in negotiating in these moments, and I don't think it comes to everybody. One thing about ourselves, and I'm very proud of, the average tenure of a property manager who works within we call it our family, within our team, is over 4 years compared to the industry, which is only 9 months. So they have a better understanding of the tenants and the landlords, and are happy to negotiate because they have relationships. And that's one thing I pride ourselves on with our service standards, that we have good relationships with our landlords and our tenants. Our job is to negotiate the best outcome for both people.
It is. It is.
Which is very, very important. Pardon me. Has anything been announced about referrals on up and coming state and land tax and council rates, which has been proposed for 2020?
Yes, there have been a number of things announced for that. Land tax rebate there is a rebate available to landlords by way of land tax if you're eligible. You can obtain more information on this via the Queensland Government website, and I think it's important that we get that information out to you. I know for all of our current landlords, we've pushed out all of that information. For us, we've been very active over this period of time in letting the tenants know every avenue that's available to them that we're aware of, and also letting the landlords know every avenue that's available to them. So the important part here is that the purpose of all of this is to have tenants in a position where they can have options available to them if they've lost their job or if they've lost part of their income, so that they can still honour their obligations within the tenancy agreement. Now, for the landlords as well, there are a number of incentives and a number of initiatives out there that are available to landlords, and we feel like it's our responsibility to get as much of that information out to landlords as we can. So for Coronis landlords, they will have already received information on all of this, and it will be ongoing. But yes, certainly land tax rebates are available. A 2% waiver on land tax surcharge is also available. A 3-month...
on the international clients?
Yes.
That's on international clients, yes.
A 3-month deferral on land tax as well is available to landlords. But again, we'll get more information out to you, and it is also available on the council website.
Yeah, look, I think it's every bit helps, yeah. And if you're above the threshold, not all of our clients, there's only 16% of our clients are subject to land tax for their residential properties, and some of the commercial properties we do manage. But a 25% discount on land tax it all helps. So it helps defer for the owner the reduction in rent that we've been doing, which is good. Yep. Can landlords apply for any government assistance for rental loss incurred, such as freezing body corporate fees, rates, urban utilities fees, etc.? Are there any bank freezing loans?
So there's a few parts to that question. So council rates, there is an availability there for up to 9 months to have rates deferred. There's also a $200 utility payment that is available to landlords, and my understanding is that is an automatic payment, so you don't need to apply for that. That will just be awarded for electricity. There are also a number of banks that are offering deferral payments to their clients. Again, that's a tricky one because there are so many banks doing so many different things, so it's very hard for me to speak specifically about what the banks are offering. I know personally for me, we have used our Coronis broker to renegotiate our fees, which has made a significant impact to us of about $1,200 a month. So personally, I can speak on that matter, but it really is an individual thing where you need to contact your bank or contact a Coronis broker, and they will be able to help you with what's available to you there.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think everybody who has charging anything at the moment, we'll learn more about it in the coming weeks for sure, but I think everybody's going to be very understanding of what's going on. We're in pretty unprecedented times, yeah? They're expecting, at the moment, there's 1 in 20 people that have zero income at the moment. That's going to have some devastating effects on our economy, and we've all got to be prepared for it. The way that I'm talking about for our business doing this is, look, I'm hoping for the best. Like us all, we must have hope that it's going to be great, but I certainly am preparing for the worst. And I want to, for you as our, especially the Coronis family clients, so to speak, I want to prepare you very well, and we will be doing everything possible to minimise your loss and getting as much information, and which in turn will be as much revenue from different parts like land tax and banks and utilities providers. You have our word on that we will be minimising any loss that comes your way, and we are all over it. I'm very proud of Jodi and her team. Has the government published the guidelines in details anywhere for landlords to read?
They have. The government have a site which they refer to as the Hub, which is available. I believe that we can get this up on our website for everybody to see, or that will already be there for you. But in effect, it's www.covid19.qld.gov.au/the Hub.
That's a whole heap of things to remember. So what I will say, we'll get that up on our front page of our website today, this afternoon. I'm sure somebody can help us do that. And it'll be easy if we used to go there and click the link. I think that would be a much better thing.
It is actually fantastic. It's a great website. I'm on it all the time. I'm keeping an eye. My role here is to keep abreast of everything that's happening.
Yes.
So I'm constantly looking at all of these websites, that everything's available to us to work out what will benefit each party, and then getting that information out to everybody.
Yeah, well done. Here's a great question. We just bought a house that has a tenant in until June. Yeah, we sold our house to move into this new one and currently living in temporary accommodation. My question is, could the tenants who are living in the house that we have just bought automatically get an extension to the lease, or do we still need to vacate at the end, or do they still need to vacate at the end of June so we can move in?
Yeah, look, this is a very specific question that, again, can have varying answers. So
and big impacts too, for someone trying to move into their first home. And again, there's nobody's fault here, right? This is just what we've got to navigate, like everything else. Yeah.
My way of thinking around that, if the notice to leave was issued prior to COVID-19, then certainly there would be a process where you could just honour that and move into the property. If it was issued post COVID-19, then obviously that then becomes a negotiation. What we're finding though in these negotiation processes is that most tenants, most people are very reasonable, right?
Yes.
So I think there's fear around people being unreasonable,
yes,
and I do understand that. But most tenants, most landlords are really conscious of helping each other out through this process, and it's up to us to facilitate the best outcome for both, which I've said many times. But in this instance, obviously, if it was post-COVID-19 and there were implications there, then we would discuss it with the tenants. We would do everything we could to find them a new property. They're going to have to move into a new property, right, because you're going to move into there eventually anyway, so we would help them get to their next property.
Yep. I think that's. Look, a lot of this comes down to the ability to negotiate, right?
It is.
There is not. You might be able to write a rule book, but very rarely are we going to stick to the rule book, because we're going to have to just work around. And we're asking you, as our landlords and our tenants, to have a fair view on what's required. And we are more than happy to sit here and work through that for you. Another question here, which is another great question. If a tenant would like to negotiate the rent, how will this process look like? And what happens if there isn't a resolution between both parties? Which I think is a wonderful question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And a lot of these questions had multiple people ask them.
Yes.
And this is why, obviously, we've chosen these questions, because there are many people with very similar concerns. So my thoughts around that is that, again, going back to most tenants and most landlords being very reasonable through that process, leaning on the skills or the negotiation skills of the property manager. But we also are very aware in some instances we're just not going to be able to come to that right conclusion. I think that will be rare, very rare for people with high levels of skill, and I think it will be very frequent for the ones with low level skills in that regard. But there is negotiation or mediation available through the Residential Tenancies Authority if we can't come to the right outcome for both parties, and mediation in that regard will eventually come to a solution or an outcome for that, and it's just a process that we've got to work through.
Yeah, look, I think ultimately, I'm just talking on behalf, as a landlord and on behalf of our landlords to you, my learnings have been in this moment is to negotiate with the tenants and don't stick to anything too hard, because I think it'll eventually cost more money and more problems in the future if you don't look after your tenants. Look, in this moment in life for all of us, it's about giving, right? There's not much about taking at the moment. We all have to give. Including every business is going to be down, every employee is going to be down. The world is realigning, and we have to get used to that. And I think it's one of those moments. Please don't be hard and fast on anything at the moment. Just we have to roll with the punches of what we can achieve, and that's why the government's giving so much assistance to help tenants pay rent, and while the government's giving and the banks are giving assistance to landlords so that they can work within their obligations to pay back mortgages, etc.
Yeah, I think the number one point that I urge everyone to consider is that there are many landlords who are equally in as difficult a position as tenants.
Yes.
And I think that some of that was forgotten in the first release of what the state government was prepared to do, and why there was such a huge outpouring of opinions in that regard. So I have always known...
Thank you for all that supported that, by the way.
Oh yes, thank you so much.
State government service nearly crashed because the emails were going through them.
Look, for me, having been in property management for 35 years, I know that. I know, but a lot of people don't know that, and I think this is really important. Our tenants are now very conscious and being aware of the fact that landlords are also struggling through this time as well, and it's important to sit down and talk about those things. So negotiations vary from one extreme to the other, because in many cases we have landlords who are actually struggling more than the tenants.
Very much.
And this can be very quickly forgotten. So therein lies, I guess, the underlying point of the negotiations, and that is who is in need and what is the outcome best for both.
Yeah, I think that's a really good line, because look, we understand as a landlord there's a lot of risk. A lot of tenants don't understand that, by the way. There's a lot of risk buying a property and renting it out. In a lot of cases they haven't made the capital gains they would have made, and they're struggling to make the repayments themselves. So it's a service to the community that the private landlord does by offering housing, and I think we have to point that out to some of our tenants as well in the fairness game.
Absolutely.
Goes forward, yeah.
And I think once we do have those conversations with tenants, everybody is very open to being fair.
Yeah, no, very much. If a tenant... sorry, the last question we have here, the 20 questions we have, are you reducing your administration fees to landlords as part of the reduction in rent?
Yeah,
good question.
It is a good question. I think the best part about a commission-based fee is that when we do a really good job for the landlords, and when we're doing well and the market is strong, then we as agents also get a little bit of an uplift in our fee based on the uplift in rent that the landlords get. But also on the reverse side of that is when there are difficult times like this, and revenue or rent or income to the landlords are going down, then our fees go down with that as well, as it's a percentage-based commission. So we all shoulder a responsibility around that, and the fees do go down in line based on the percentages.
Yeah. Our fees will reduce in accordance with what our landlords are reducing with, and we still have obligations to the wonderful property managers so they can pay their expenses as well. So it's a real cascading effect that nobody knows how it's going to wash out. What I do know that's going to wash out is that it's going to get tougher, and I'm not saying that as a alarmist. I'm not that type of person. I'm very, very prepared, and I want to be prepared for you. We are prepared as a business. We're very strong as a business to make sure that we're looking after some of your biggest assets here, and we are going to get you through this. You have my word on that. We've been in business now for many years. We're very sound in what we do, and we have wonderful, wonderful people. We've made some pretty big, bold decisions. You would have seen with my last update with regard to our hub locations and office locations. So we cut as many costs out of this business to keep the people that are the main people that we need, which is our wonderful property managers in this case, and salespeople and finance brokers. And we're ploughing everything we have into the business, into our people, because that's all we have for you. We have the right people. And I'm so proud of our team at the moment. They're wonderful. What Jodi and her team have done is extraordinary. Our NPS has never been higher. For those of you who don't know what NPS is, it's the customer satisfaction survey. So please fill those out and fill it out honestly. We want to hear whether you're happy or not, so we can fix it up. As a business that's been around for many years as Coronis, all we want to do is do the right thing by you. That's our mantra. Yeah, we want to grow you. We want to grow your portfolio. We want to grow your livelihood. We want to help you as a tenant grow your family in a property. We want to hopefully help you grow to buy a property eventually if you're a tenant. So look, all of these things are for us to help, and we're here as a community, I suppose as members of the community as you are, to give as much as we can at the moment.
I'd like to say thank you, I think, to all of our Coronis landlords and to our tenants for that matter. We have had an overwhelming number of people contact us showing their appreciation for the information that we're sending out. Now, I feel that it's our obligation to do that, and we take our responsibility very, very important to us.
Yeah.
But having those responses from landlords, from tenants saying, you guys have been amazing, you've looked after our property, you've taken care of us for all these years, you're doing everything you can. It's what we need at the moment for our team. They're working so hard, 7 days a week till 7, showing properties, doing all of that. But you know, many of us are working till midnight, 1, 2, whatever it takes. And those responses and that overwhelming response of thank you is amazing and very, very much appreciated.
Yeah, very much. I think that's a really important factor to note that, you know, some of our people are working on Sundays doing inspections so they can help new tenants get into properties and they can help our landlords rent their houses out quicker. And they've got families and they've got obligations as well. But you know, the culture that's been created in the team is do whatever it takes for our clients. And I think that's a really valid point to make. So if you can and you feel up to it, please thank your property manager for what they're doing. They get so much energy for it, and it's actually the reward they need and the reward they get the most. Like all of us in life, the best reward you can have is from another human saying thank you and well done. And from my point of view as a managing director of Coronis, I will wrap this up by saying, unless Jodi, you have anything else to say at all? No. I just wanted to say again, thank you. Some of you have been, you know, more than friends than clients, because you've been with us for now 20 and 30 years from the little hole in the wall days in Stafford. Many of you have come to us over the journey, but for all of you, just as important as each other, we're here to do the best by you. I know we're doing the best by you. We don't have one of the biggest rent rolls in Australia with the highest level of care and customer service because it's an accident, because of Jodi and her team. So I just wanted to say thank you for your support, thank you for ongoing. If you've got anything you'd like to ask that's not, we haven't answered here, or you'd like to be more pinpointed about it, or you'd like to talk to Jodi and the event of her team, please feel free to email Jodi at coronis.com.au and she will be able to answer it or find the right answers for you. Again, it's uncharted waters. What we just told you today is our opinion only at this particular point in time, so please don't hold us to that. We believe it's the right opinion. We know we're on the right path. We know when it comes out we'll be ahead of the game, so you can trust us for that, and we have your best interests at heart. So again, thank you very much, and we wish you well through these really troubled times. Cheers.
Thank you.